okay, so we realize that we're in a zoo and we're playing this game. How do we play this game? Right. And that's the question. And so from that perspective, I would say, yes, there's a lot of programming for men to really steer men towards that lover magician archetype and to hide the warrior and king archetype. And this is why when men exert or express any force, right, which is that warrior archetype, it does get labeled as toxic masculinity. Right. And there's all this programming of men, doing tantra and ecstatic dance and doing meditation, again, which is all that lover magician archetype. Whereas we really need men to be in the warrior and king archetype. Right. And we're seeing the effects of this if the men are not in their warrior and king archetype, which essentially I can sum it up as the energy of I've got you. Meaning no matter how wild or crazy or unpredictable or mysterious the feminine is, that the masculine has the energetic embodiment of I've got you. Like no matter how wild, mysterious, chaotic you are, I will be here and I've got you.
Welcome to Her Second Stage, the podcast for women yearning to remember who they are and longing to rediscover themselves to live inauthentically. Today, I invited a man to the show, the topic to discuss the state of masculinity and the impact on the feminine. So welcome, Stephen. Stephen Young is a doctor in physical therapy and has been in the health and spiritual world for most of his life. He's a creator of frameworks for the health and divine essence of humanity, which I want to get back to. Stephen describes himself as an alchemist, a time traveler. Stephen is an amazing guide and mentor, not only to me, but to many other business owners. And he's involved in creating some amazing businesses that will for sure impact the world and drive as humanity forward. Stephen, welcome. I'm so grateful to have you in my life as a teacher, a guide, and mentor, and sharing with my audience your beliefs around masculinity.
Sure. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of these things called the Hermetic laws, right? And so there's these 7 laws that sort of govern, in a way, how our reality works. And I believe that in the first phase of my life, right, I was put into the system, right? Operated from within the medical system, within the psychological system. And really about 15 years ago, I was sort of plucked out of that system in a way, right? And then the story I always tell is I was in my clinic, I went upstairs and got a massage. And then about a minute afterwards, I got a text from someone that's like 2,000 miles away. And a text said, "How was your massage?" Right. And then I, of course, asked, "How do you know I just got a massage?" And then her response was, "Your soul told me." And so that was like my first undeniable experience of clearly there's another framework of reality that's happening. And so really in the last 15 years, I've sort of devoted my attention to seeking, right? What are these other contexts? And what I came across is that, the best analogy I can give is, while we believe we're free in this world, it's almost like we live in a zoo and we're not the zookeepers. And then we are tricked into thinking we can make this zoo prettier and more fun and have it more extravagant, but we still are in a zoo, right? And so my passion right now is to provide frameworks that helps people realize that we have the absolute divine right to exit these zoos and live in a world that is beyond anything that we can imagine. And so while I start from that health and wellness framework, really it's a bigger game that we're playing, which is how do you live a life that you get to create and choose beyond your imagination.
Yeah. I'm so happy that you are guiding me out my little zoo as well. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. I just want to give you some perspective. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a series of episodes for women around the feminine, episode on divine feminine, the wounded, healed feminine archetypes, the light and dark, the shadow of the feminine, how she shows up, and why it's important to heal those shadows and the wounds so that we can show up whole in the world.
Mhm.
And I've also produced, or I'm in the process of producing, an episode around masculine archetypes for women to recognize the healthy masculine and how they show up in their archetypes, the light and dark, and also the shadow side of the archetypes for men. So that's what I wanted more. You bring the masculine, the male voice to this very feminine and female conversation and to help and guide a woman on the masculinity. We've had this narrative of toxic masculinity that we see, and a lot of women are experiencing, and whether it's toxic or not, I think it's just became a narrative on men, on the toxic mixed masculinity. So I want to discuss with you what is the opposite, like why do you think it happened, like this big narrative, like men are toxic when they show up in their full masculine, and what is a healthy masculine, and how do we as women recognize them?
Sure. Yeah, and I always love to set the context first before we get into the strategy and the tactics, right? And so, and this is a good example of sort of the zoo analogy. And the entire story and framework of how there is, in fact, toxic masculinity, and that women and men, right, have their wounds that they're healing from. That's all a context. And so we could create a different context. And I'll give an example. Imagine the contraction and even the lack of awareness, right, of our masculine and feminine energies. That's currently framed, right, contextualized as wounding, and there's something to fix, right? But what if the divine, like our higher infinite intelligence self / God, which can access all time, orchestrated all this, right? And so they orchestrated all of this for us to have the contrast so that we can have wisdom. And what I mean by that is, from that perspective, then every wounding or heightened emotional experience that we've had that contracted us, that blinded us from a full experience of the masculine and feminine, was all purposefully orchestrated so that now we can have the greatest fun, greatest pleasure, greatest fulfillment to explore this, right? And that's a very different context than there was something wrong that happened or something that needs to be healed or fixed, right? So I just want to offer that context, because the box that is perpetuating all of this that we're discussing is the box, the illusion of you're not there yet, right? Because the you're not there yet frequency causes us to think of every aspect of our life as you're not there yet, so that there's something to fix. And so we perpetuate that cycle, thinking that we'll eventually, if we fix it enough, it'll be fixed. But really, it's just we get to opt out of that context. And so first that. And if we jump into the strategy, for sure, I always say, we had this discussion in Sedona, which is like, we really do get to honor what I call the other team, right? We get to honor the people that created the zoo. Because what fun, what a great job they've done to trick us, right? Versus, oh, they're evil and we need to defeat them, right? It's like we get to honor what a great job, how they completely tricked, which we'll get into, the feminine into a certain context and the masculine into a certain context, to basically depolarize the masculine and feminine poles so that we do not have energy as a humanity to create our own reality, right? In other words, they depolarized it on purpose, and they did a great job to keep us subdued so that we continue to stay in the zoo, right? Because they believe the zoo is the best thing to keep us safe, right? So first and foremost, we do get to honor that, again, versus they're bad and judgment.
Judge them. Yes.
Right. So once we set the container divinely orchestrated as a unity, within separation, the other team did a beautiful job. Great job tricking us. And then now we can go into, okay, so we realize that we're in a zoo and we're playing this game. How do we play this game? right? And that's the question. And so from that perspective, I would say, yes, there's a lot of programming for men to really steer men towards that lover magician archetype and to hide the warrior and king archetype. And this is why when men exert or express any force, right, which is that warrior archetype, it does get labeled as toxic masculinity. Right. And there's all this programming of men, doing tantra and ecstatic dance and doing meditation, again, which is all that lover magician archetype. Whereas we really need men to be in the warrior and king archetype, right? And we're seeing the effects of this. If the men are not in their warrior and king archetype, which essentially I can sum it up as the energy of I've got you. Meaning no matter how wild or crazy or unpredictable or mysterious the feminine is, that the masculine has the energetic embodiment of I've got you. Like no matter how wild, mysterious, chaotic you are, I will be here and I've got you, right? I'll take care of this and I'll take care of you, right? So that's that warrior and king archetype. But we can see, right, in our society that is literally being deprogrammed. You look at television shows and how men are being portrayed, all the things, there's that side of it, right? On the flip side, the women also being depolarized and programmed, right? And there's the whole like women equal rights as men, they need to excel in their job and they have equal pay. They're being tricked into sort of this accomplishment, masculine energy and devaluing the mystery, right? The unknown, the unpredictability, the inspiration aspect of feminine energy and more towards the structure, execution, accomplishment, which is basically masculine energy, right? So once we understand this dance, we can start to laugh at it and go, got it. How do we want to navigate this forward and navigate forward from a beautiful game that we're playing and not from a fixing, not there yet perspective.
We opt out of the not fixing because we are like so in that game, not just fixing ourselves, but we always see, oh, this one needs to fix him. You see.
What's interesting is we have all the neuroscience showing us, right? That's why there's strength finders, right? A lot of people have heard of strength finders. We have all the neuroscience to show that when we actually enhance and accentuate our strengths, it's actually more profound for us than trying to fix, right, anything that we deem as wrong, right? Literally, there's all kinds of neuroscience behind this, right? And if I were to change that from entrepreneurial 3D language to more spiritual language, if we simply make the light brighter, it gets rid of the darkness, right? That's another way to say exactly the same thing. And so to answer your question, the beauty of it is your question has the answer built in. This is how everything works, right? We literally just choose to opt out. All of this is simply an awareness of choice, right? It's a constant awareness, moment to moment, to choose to play a different game. And we recognize that we are swimming in the collective consciousness and energy of you're not there yet. But moment to moment, we just revert back to, no, we've always been there, right? Because everything is divinely orchestrated and that everything already is whole. And we're not being in passivity or not being in inaction. A lot of people think, oh, if everything's whole, you would just kind of sit there and be. No, we would still do what children do all the time with unlimited energy. We would play, right? We would be fully expressing without attachment and fully expressing ourselves, which we would call play. And we would literally essentially play our way through this game of this masculine and feminine dynamic.
Playing, how many adults are still playing? We are so serious about, it's something we really need to remember, the playing aspect of life. And I remember just how everybody makes up. I remember when my son was in little preschool and they were playing in the sandbox and they would just make up their own rules. And the argument is the one who comes up with the rules, you get to play that boy's rules unless your rules suck and someone else, and that was just the rule and everybody played. And tomorrow it was a whole different game. And yesterday's, we are fighting about something we were disagreed on, doesn't exist in their little rule. It's fascinating, and I think we as adults have really need to tap back into that, to opt out of what we call reality or what we think is so important in life. Is that what you would say? Is just start playing a different game?
Absolutely, right. It's funny that the word remember, it applies in so many ways. We remember as in we mentally, what we forgot, we remember. But also naturally, as we remember, as we gather again as a tribe, right? Yes. This happens naturally as well. And so there's like the double meaning of remember that's so powerful, because this is not about learning anything new. We knew this as children before it was programmed out of us. We would just make up our own reality, right? Yeah. And so literally as children, we literally were divine beings able to create our own rules of the game. And then once we entered school, that was programmed out of us, right? All on purpose, right? Because school was designed to make obedient factory workers, not enlightened divine beings. But we were born enlightened divine beings. And so this is so powerful to take in, because this is not about more learning and going to some kind of guru's class or something. This is all literally just tapping back into what we were born with already. Right, all the resources have always been there, and it's this game. I call it like the game of hide and seek. We were born like, it's almost like the vision I got was when we incarnate. It's like, all right, our physical self and our divine spirit, God self is like, all right, we came to play a game, and your physical self's like, okay, I'm going to count to 10. You're going to go hide, and I'm going to go find you, and that's all this is.
We take 100 years to just find all of those.
Right. Sometimes our divine selves are really good at hiding really well.
I love remember. And as we have that innate need for community and getting together, and I never really saw it like that. So in I would love to remember all of the women in our fullness and sisterhood. So thank you for that reminder, or that putting it or reframing of the word remembering. It's really beautiful. So women, and again, you're going to go into opt in and opt out, I will give the answer, but women has such a relationship with fear, very different than what men has. And every decision, they did that project, like how many times a woman a day thinks about fear, or what they think about and what men thinks about every day. And men are like football and beer and stuff like that. And literally woman has every encounter, like hundreds of times a day, experienced, am I safe? Where's the danger coming from? So how, if you're coming from, how do you opt out of the fear? Because the world and the narrative, the world's not necessarily a safe place for feminine or females. And how do we recalibrate as women our nervous system to receive the I got you energy? Because we've had a conversation similar, and I just felt it in my body when you say I got you, from the masculine to the feminine. And but we often can't receive it as women, because we have all of these narratives and fears that's driving us. How can we as women and the feminine feel safe in a world that's not really created for the feminine to feel safe in?
And, again, I would start with context, and we'll get to strategy and tactics. Everything in our reality follows a rhythm, just like the seasons, right? Nothing is linear. There were times for thousands of years that women actually were it was a matriarchal society, right? And so now we've shifted to patriarchal. So there is this natural rhythm, and it's helpful to understand that, because it allows grace for what is happening, right? So that we're not coming from, we need to do something about this. It's more like, let's play, right? We give it grace and we play. And then the strategy thing is, it's just polarity, right? And so when one pole happens, in other words, when the feminine softens, the masculine will always automatically go into the I've got you energy. And vice versa. If the masculine goes into the I've got you energy, the women will automatically soften. So we do recognize that there is this dance that you can affect from either side. And now let's get into the tactical. So if the question is, how do women navigate fear, right? How do we essentially reduce fear so that women can be in that softer energy? Well, we know through the understanding of hermetics is that as soon as a woman sets the intention to not be in fear, they've also spellcasted that they're currently in fear, right? This is the law of polarity. So we know that the direct intention of reducing fear doesn't work, right? Because you're just spellcasting that you're in fear as you set the intention to reduce fear. So really the question is, what is another intention to set, or another game to play, or another polarity to embody that automatically dissolves fear, right? And I would say there are many. I'm going to give one example, maybe two. One example is, as all humans, men and women, realize that we're all interconnected, right? That we are literally interconnected with all humans, all life. And we work on feeling more and more interconnected. Now, keep in mind, the polarity of this is we're playing the game of not interconnected and more interconnected, right? Because we can't avoid these polarities. And so, but as we work on this, every inch that we work towards interconnected, fear automatically dissolves, right? Because we realize there is no other, that this fear of the other, right, is actually just an illusion, right? That happens as a side effect, right? That's one example. I'm going to give another one. And this is, one of the benefits of religion, even though religion it's a box, but one of the benefits of religion is this faith in God, right? As we embody our faith in God, it would automatically also dissolve fear, right? That's another oblique way, right? Because every inch that you move towards, actually, I am not driving reality, that I'm surrendering my will to God's will, and that God is driving, that would also reduce fear, right? And we can probably come up with 10 others. But the point being, I want the listeners to know that we can choose another way, an oblique way. What's another game that we can play where that game automatically dissolves fear? And it's going to be in terms of fear, right? Fear is the illusion of separation. So any intention you set for unity, right? That could be interconnectedness, it could be faith in God, anything along the lines of that is going to automatically dissolve fear. And the beauty of this, as women dissolve their fear, which means they soften, right? They don't need to be in their masculine to provide their own safety. This will automatically help men, quote unquote, step up and get into their masculine.
I think that would be a very scary process for women, because you're waiting for the men to be in their masculine for we're going round and around the same circle. The men waiting for the woman to soften, and women waiting for the men to show up.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the women's? If women should show up first, that men will, even in a place of work and in business, do we wait for the men to see me and then the men, or how do I soften with
sure.
and that's what a conversation like how do I show up softer in the business?
The greater game that's happening, right, for men and women is to realize that you are an aspect of God, right? Like this is languaged, right, in many cultures, in spiritual practices, which another way said is everything in the external world is a mirror of you. So imagine staring in the mirror with like ketchup on your face and you go, well, do I wipe or does the mirror wipe for me? Of course you wipe, right? Because the mirror is never going to wipe for you because it's a mirror, right? And so that is the big aha that we get to take. And the programming, right? If we were to subdue and make a zoo and control everyone, we would program them to think, no, the mirror eventually will wipe you, right? We would program everyone like, no, it's not you. It's of course the other. It's the blame game that keeps us in the loop. And so from that perspective, I would say equally, the men get to realize, no, it's not up to the women to soften. It's up to us to embody that king warrior archetype of I've got you. And from a woman perspective, it's not about the men adopting that and then we'll soften. It's we will soften and then they will respond to that softness, right? And I shared a story. I literally lived this because all previous partners I ever had, whenever there was a friction, they would be in their mask and be like, no, this is wrong. You did this, right? Structure, boom, boom, boom. This is what needs to happen. These are my boundaries, all very masculine energy. And I had this one relationship where the friction happened and she just said, like, I don't understand what's happening. I'm so scared, like feminine energy. And me, there was no thinking. There was no like, okay, so this is what she's saying. What is the masculine thing to do? There was no thinking. My non-thinking response to her words was, that will never happen again.
That's beautiful.
And that was such a living example of the power, right, of this dynamic as it happens.
Say faith in God. What if people say, I am not religious, or I don't believe there's a God, or, you know, that conversation, and I don't want to lose the people who believe they're not religious. I just want you to speak to that because I know you.
I totally wanted to crack a joke, but I'll keep it semi-serious. What I would say is even atheists, right? Even people who don't believe in a God, you know, and I've met plenty of those people. When I ask them this question, which is, do you feel like it's not a God, but there's some type of, I don't know, greater intelligence, right? Some force out there that is beyond your human self. Like, do you believe in that? And most of them will say yes, right? They're not so egocentric. They're like, no, I am the omnipresent thing. I rule the universe, right? They believe that, of course, there's something out there that they don't get. So I would say, trust that. We don't have to label it. We don't have to label it as God. We don't have to label it as spirit. We don't have to label it as higher self. Let's not even label it. It's this thing that is beyond you. And I think we can all agree that we have an inner felt sense of that. And I do want to add one thing that's coming to me is everything that we just spoke about, because this is a podcast, right? It involves words. It'd be a silly podcast if it was just like silence and you just, you know, sat there for 20 minutes. I do want to say that we are using a masculine energy in a masculine container to deliver this, right? Is a felt sense. There's a sense to navigate this masculine feminine dance that doesn't involve words at all. Right? I just want to put that into the talking circle that for anyone listening, that there are moments you can just sit in stillness and not try to understand this. I would recommend actually listening to this and then take some moments to just feel, right? And trust your feeling once you listen to this. That's the feminine energy. Because if you listen to this and try to understand it, that's still in the masculine side.
Thank you so much for adding that. Is we as women so are trapped into our hands and often just forget to feel what we feel about, almost feel what we feel about the information that comes our way.
Exactly.
What are the conversations men are having around the same conversation?
Yeah.
Can you reflect, show some light on that part of the world we find very interesting? And
I could definitely give like behind the curtains, right? Like what's the conversation? Because, you know, I'm involved in a few, just here in Austin, right? There's like these group chats where it's mostly, it's men, it's, you know, men chat groups. And then, you know, I've talked to people who run men's circles and all the things. And so I will say that there's, you know, most things are an 80-20, right? Pareto principle. I would say right now, 80% of the men are still living with the illusion of the mirror needs to go first.
Yeah.
Right? So they essentially complain, right, about where are the feminine women, right? They're so in their masculine and so on and so forth. So they're still on the, what I would consider the illusion side of it. But there are 20% of men who get this, like who get, no. We shift, and then we shift all of reality, right? And so that's sort of the experience that I'm having, is that the majority of men are still living with the women go first, and then we get to do and feel, and it would be amazing for us if they did this. But there are for sure a smaller percentage of men who realize that no, we get to choose reality, right? And so, and you've experienced like literally when we shift, the external world immediately shifts.
Do you find different age groups are differently, or is it right through, like, are the younger men versus men in their second stage? And I think the real question is, where's the 20% that knows?
Yeah.
I'm wiping my face, I'm not waiting for the mirror. Like, are they like,
this is a great
are they in business? Are they yogis? Are they, have they come full circle? I'm just curious because I think women would want to know where those men are.
From my experience, the younger men, while they have more consciousness, spiritual practices, because they were born in a state of human existence where we are just vibrating at a different frequency to people that were born, 50 years ago, right? So the younger men for sure have this deeper embodiment of spiritual practices and awareness of this meta game, but yet they also grew up in a time where there's much more programming into the lover magician, right? And the flip side to this is the older men, while they were born in a time of human or earth vibration that was a bit denser, so they are in their own path of learning about spiritual awareness in the meta that the younger men almost like are innately born with. However, they were born at a time where there wasn't as much programming away from the king warrior archetype.
Yes.
Right. So this is the interesting dynamic, is that it's almost like they lived in a time where those archetypes were honored. Right. And there wasn't as much programming to just steer men towards the lover magician. So we have this, like, again, this dance. And what I would recommend, right, for women and men listening is for the men to take a step back and notice this. And then for the women to kind of also recognize, again, this is all being shown to us for a reason beyond what we're even talking about here, meaning the balance and the harmony of masculine and feminine. We're literally noticing these contrasts for our soul and our spirit to reveal something deep within ourselves that, in fact, this is like the punchline of it, that in fact has nothing to do with masculine and feminine dynamics, if that makes sense. Like, even though we are here to talk about masculine and feminine dynamics and all that stuff, and all these, awarenesses are coming, just also your observer self gets to observe, and then your feeling self gets to feel as this discussion is happening. What's coming up for me to feel? Because that feeling and that intellectual awareness is probably revealing something that actually has nothing to do with masculine or feminine. There's a bigger meta. So I just want to speak that into the space so that
thank you for that insight. Is the male archetypes, masculine archetypes, either or, like the lover, magician? Can you either only be that from a male point of view, or king and warrior? Because on the women's archetypes, I'm talking that you all of them, and you use them as a resource to resource yourself for how you need to show up. Sometimes I need to be the queen, and sometimes I need to be the lover or the temptress, so I get to be the creatrix and play a little bit more. So I would think that that's sort of the male archetype should be the same. Men can use it to resource themselves into their masculine to support. I mean, again, I know this is just the polarities that we're talking about, but let's for them to use and know about it so they can show up in whichever energy is best for the situation.
Yeah. So for sure, the lover, magician, warrior, king archetypes fit men and women. Right. And so one way to conceptualize this is that the men are being pushed into the lover magician, and then the women are being pushed into the warrior king, right? Because they have to be their own fighter for their own safety, and they have to be their own queen to protect their kingdom, right? And the game is for both sexes, male and female, to have the ability to go into any archetype at any moment.
Yes.
This is the true game, right? So it's less about, well, the women, even though we've framed it currently so far as the women will get to be lover magician more when the men essentially becomes king and warrior. But really the bigger game is for both men and women to be able to switch between any of those four archetypes at any time, right? And because we all have masculine and feminine gender energies in us. We are both the sun and the moon on the inside, right? So it's really important to kind of recognize that it's less about what the women need to do or what the men need to do. The big game is, oh no, we get to choose within those four archetypes at any moment. You can be at work and be like, this needs to be done, right? As a female, in the masculine, execute. But the very next moment, you can totally be in the feminine, just be like, I have no idea what's happening, but I'm going to inspire the crap out of you to get things done. Right? And it's the ability to swing right through the four archetypes at will. That's the big
it's
game.
also the consciousness around it, that it's resourcing us. It's not about the other person, but it's about how I show up. And the word inspire really is inspirational to me, is how we can inspire both sexes or genders to show up better by just honoring our own polarity or essence. So I just want to, as we sort of get to the end, just how do women become aware when they are in the opposite polarity? How will they show up? What does that do to what should they be noticing immediately in the other gender if they show up, and how do they almost use the masculine, or how do they flip back? Like tactical. I mean, we talk about big picture, and so I'm showing up, I'm going to get things done or whatever, and everybody is so scared of me at work or whatever. How do we, and now got to go home to my partner, and I can't go like this to home, or even in the next meeting when I need to work with females.
Yeah, I've experienced this, and I was just reminded of this recently at a retreat I was co-facilitating. There were 12 other facilitators, and one was a couple, husband and wife, and they teach this sort of, masculine and feminine stuff. And it was hilarious to see that essentially the wife was saying how the husband literally does all the work. Like, he gladly goes food shopping, puts the kids to bed, does all the things, and she kind of prances around and dances and says hello. And how I observed that happening is the whole retreat, she constantly praised how he was showing up. There was never any correction energy or you should be doing this energy, because she was basically inspiring him, right? By just constantly praising him and cherishing him, and his devotion to her, because that energy just shines through, and he intrinsically was doing all this stuff for her, right? And so that's essentially a very easy tactical thing, right? And again, this goes both ways. I'm not saying how this game works is the women need to praise the men. At least the men, right? If the men were to initiate, they would essentially make the women, I'll be more specific, their attention to the electrical system of the women, right? Their attention to the electrical system of the women becomes one of their top priorities, because the women will be able to feel this, and they'll just literally naturally soften, right? Because men are so much into what they need to accomplish, they forget that one of the things that they get to tend to, one of the most important things a man gets to tend to, is the woman's electrical system, right? And so for men, tactical thing would be, you could be at a business meeting, you could be at home, anywhere.
Men are not taught this in business and development and how to get better at your job or whatever.
What I'm about to say will make total sense once you get this context, which is what we language as business, it's still life.
Yes. Once
you realize that this is all life, when in life should a man not tend to a woman? Never.
I love, just say that again. When should men not attend?
tend to women, right? It's all life. When in life would a man be like, no, I don't need to tend to the women right now?
Yes.
Forever. Yeah. So
to the men out listening, remember that. Stephen, I thank you so much. And we're getting to the end of the conversation. So I have a ritual where a previous guest leaves a question for the next guest. And your question is, if you were to follow your heart, where would it lead you?
Well, I definitely feel like I swim in miracles. If I were to say, if I follow my heart even more, I really would, besides doing all the magical things that I get to do all the time, if I would imagine following my heart even more, I would place a bit more attention without attachment, a bit more attention and emphasis to like my personal relationships.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, because right now, a lot of my focus is on broader, bigger, like world things. Yeah, I would say just be more focused on like just deep personal relationships.
Yeah, you being vulnerable and sharing that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Of course.
Okay, thank you. I'm ending this conversation, and I'm sure there's so much to unpack still in so many of this game of the zoo. We can to have some more conversations in the future.